Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage one of Tour of the Basque Country 2025. Today's race, 16.5 kilometers long, about 10 miles in length, we'll call it. Now, today's race, individual time trial being stage one, changes the chemistry a lot for the riders. It's not a difficult stage. It's a little bit lumpy and bumpy. It comes off the ramp once you leave the basketball court there. So you got to be a little bit careful when you're leaving the stadium there. You can't slip out. Remember, the floors there are going to be a little bit slipperier than you would have if you're out on the road. So the riders got to be a little bit careful leaving the stadium. Then after that, though, it's pretty open with just the roundabout early, and then it's just kind of rolling, maybe bumpy at the best. And really the most difficult thing about today's 10-mile course, 16.5 kilometers long, is going to be the last corner, the last left. When you come out of that with 100 meters to go, they got to be a little bit careful there. We're going to see some little bit of an action there, and a little bit of scares and thrills, but the most of the course before that, it's not that complicated. Just rolling and flat, most of it. So when I won in 2010, it was the final stage. Now I averaged 40.5 kilometers an hour when I won that stage, but it was a little bit different course. And in those years, it went up a 20% climb, and then it came down a 20% climb. So you really couldn't go no brakes all the way down the climb. It was crazy difficult going up and then coming down with switchbacks. And we're talking about 15 to 20% descent. It was crazy through some valleys and then the second climb at the end. So it was more for the smaller guys. That's how I won them. My only individual time trial was that year in 2010 at the Basque Country throughout my whole career racing over in Europe. Won some time trials, of course, in the US, so I have some experience with winning time trials. But when you're over in Europe and you start the first stage instead of the last stage, the reason why I brought that up anyways is because it changes the chemistry throughout the early parts of the race if you didn't have an outright leader versus coming into an individual time trial. That means whoever wins the individual time trial today, their team will normally take control. So if I take you back to 2010, it was a little more loosey-goosey through the first stages on who was going to control. But Alejandro Valverde was one of the #1 ranked riders in the world multiple years throughout his career, 4 or 5. It was a ton. Valverde was feared throughout the peloton. So his team did most of the controlling that year at the Basque Country, and then I just had to win the individual time trial and take the Chapela home with me and the race leader's yellow jersey. So thank you there for the Spanish rider Alejandro Valverde for delivering most of the work throughout that Basque Country. Of course, I had to follow his wheels going up all the climb. Now, when we get into today's race, the reason why I brought up all that earlier stuff is because when the cameras come on proper, we see Max Schachmann. Max Schachmann's already in the hot seat. He's already left the ramp and he's already finished the stage today, but he's in the hot seat and he's holding an average kilometer an hour of 53.1 with a time of 18:37 to put him in the hot seat. Now, normally when you flip on the cameras and you see the first rider in the hot seat, you assume they went off early, so the better riders normally go off at the finish, and today's race is going to finish with Brandon McNulty, who happens to be the U.S. Pro Time Trial Champion. So you'd expect that this first time from Max Schachmann might not be that stellar. But when we start comparing some average kilometers per hour with the average speed of 53.1 there from Max Schachmann in the hot seat, you got to understand, this guy went fast. Now, if we start backing up some of the film of Max Schachmann, we know that he's gone fast speeds before, because I can back you up into the Tour of Swiss that Remco Evenepoel won, and he averaged 54 kilometers an hour. You look down that list and you see in 6th place, that's Max Schachmann, and he averaged 52.8 kilometers an hour. Now, if you back it up from 2022 and you go into 2019, here at the Basque Country, stage 1 individual time trial, well, Max Schachmann won that day to open up the Basque Country, and he had an average speed of 39.5. But of course, it was hillier. So why am I talking about all this and bringing it up is because Max Schachmann right now with his time in the hot seat, when we're so used to flipping on the screen and just thinking, wow, there's no way this first guy's going to win. But when you look at 53 kilometers an hour, you know it's a legit time. So when you start comparing these times with past times, you know that the speeds in the professional peloton have started to change quite a bit, especially when I've taken some times from Fabian Cancellara, when I take you back to Algarve in 2016, 18-kilometer course, that he averaged 51.5 kilometers an hour. That was fairly flat, like today's stage 1 here of the Basque Country. So in my day, most of the guys were winning with about 51 kilometers an hour. Sure, there was times when guys are pulling some faster times, but 51 kilometers an hour normally won on a course like today, and we start looking at Schachmann's at over 53 kilometers an hour. You got to understand that the bikes and the equipment certainly are helping the riders out, put out some more speed, because even when I show you the course profile of today's race, and we start looking at how it leaves the stadium, goes out and does a lap and comes back, and then just backtracks a little bit out and back into the stadium, finishing just on the side, you know that if there's a headwind or a tailwind, well, the riders would have to feel it either going out or coming back. So Max Schachmann's time is getting impressive, which means that, of course, the cycling equipment is getting impressive too. Okay, the next Max out on the course is going to be a little bit different than Max Schachmann. This is going to be Max van Gils, and he's having some problems when he's coming through the left corner. You see him setting up for the left. He's going to lose the back tire just a little bit, and as he loses the back tire, this was the tricky section here on the course. It's the last one with 100 meters to go to the finish. Well, we see Max van Gils as he has to straighten up his bike. Once he does, we see the official there that's in the red jacket. He's jumping out of the way as Max van Gils has to shoot straight now because he can't make the left. He shoots through it, hops over the electrical cord there, and then has to do a U-turn and come back onto the course as all the fans are telling him you got to go the other direction. Well, as he's coming back on the course, he's got to worry about his team car too. Comes back out, makes the right, and then sprints into the line to finish 48 seconds down in 12th place. Next rider we see out on the course is going to be Vlasov, just getting ready up on the ramp. Once we see Vlasov take off, he shoots through the stadium and exits there. Then we start seeing some pretty good times from Vlasov as he's about 5 seconds back from the race leaders at the split times. Once he comes into the finish, he starts hugging the corners, and there's a little bump in the road, and you see the official with the arms out. This guy's getting some energy out here as he's trying to keep all the riders doing the left. Well, Vlasov does a good job of doing the left, starts sprinting into the finish, and he'll cross the line 10 seconds down in 3rd place. So Alexander Vlasov right now is looking like one of the general classification threats here, just being 10 seconds back from the time of Max Schachmann. With that time set, we start looking at some of the riders on the course, and Julian Alaphilippe's out there. Now, the Frenchman, it's really strange. I can't predict what the Frenchman's ever going to do. We go back into last year's Giro d'Italia where he won the stage. He was magnificent there holding off the peloton all the way into the finish to win a Giro stage, but then, of course, went a little bit quiet. Won some other smaller races throughout the season, but comes here in the Basque Country, and when we see him crossing the line, he's about a minute back on the time, so the Frenchman right now is clearly not in top shape. Now, you got to remember, the Basque Country is usually the time of the year when all of the GC favorites merge onto the Basque Country because the bigger guys are, of course, at Tour of Flanders that just finished yesterday with a magnificent win from Tadej Pogacar, who happens to be a GC guy. But everybody behind Tadej Pogacar, the Mathieu van der Poels, the Mads Pedersen, and the Wout van Aerts, those are all classic guys. So right here, when you're at the Basque Country, you normally get a bunch of smaller guys getting ready so that they can go do their own classics when it starts up at Amstel Gold, Flèche Wallonne, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But with Julian Alaphilippe's time right now of over a minute back, I got to start wondering where the Frenchman's form is when we start looking at him leaving this race. It's only going to be a few more days after the Basque Country before, of course, he starts Amstel Gold, Flèche Wallonne, and then goes into Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So the Frenchman, his form's always fluctuating all over the place. And if I bring you way back to 2019 when he was leading the Tour de France, he was a first-page rider. There's no doubt about that. It wasn't until we started seeing the crashes at Liège-Bastogne-Liège that the Frenchman's form has been fluctuating left to right and center all over the time. And even right here at the Basque Country, I'm starting to wonder if he's going to make it into the Classics with some good form after losing a minute here on the individual time trial. Well, we start looking at some of the riders warming up, and we see that it's Almeida, UAE Team Emirates, warming up. First, he was warming up with his teammates there as they're getting ready and warming the legs up. This is a crucial time because when you're talking about a 16.5 kilometer course, they got to get this warm-up just dialed in perfect. Now, after the camera leaves him, we're going to go up onto the ramp and we're going to see Florian Lipovitz from Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe. As Florian Lipovitz is flying some pretty fast times out there, we'll see him coming into the final corner, sprinting into the finish, and we know at this moment that Max Schachmann in the hot seat's getting a little bit worried as as Florian Lipovitz flies across the finish line, but he's 3/4 of a second behind the time of Max Schachmann. So we see Florian Lipovitz taking second on the stage right now at this moment, and Schachmann's getting a little bit excited. Now we go back to that warming up, and we see that it's Almeida is the last rider for UAE Team Emirates warming up, as all his teammates have been out on the course, and we know Del Toro crossed the line 11th with about a time of 23 seconds back from Max Schachmann. All right, we start going into the later phases here of stage 1 of Tour of the Basque Country, and we see Joao Almeida, UAE Team Emirates, up on the ramp. When the picture goes down to look at his one by, we see that he's running a 62.11. Now, 62.11 is pretty big gear, but this isn't even going to be the biggest chain ring that we see here on stage 1. We will see Almeida leave the ramp, and when he starts coming through the time checks, he's 7 seconds back on the first time check. The second time check, they got him at 8 seconds back, but when he's coming in to finish, Joao Almeida right now is flying as he's coming up the right side of the fencing, getting ready to set up for the left turn. When he does, he goes into the left turn, and he's skimming the apex of the corner right there, comes out in fabulous position, and then starts sprinting all the way to the line. When he sprints to the line, though, the problem is we got the Bahrain victorious rider, Jack Haig, in front there of Almeida, so we don't get to see Almeida actually finishing, but we see Jack Haig throwing his bike, losing about 56, 58 seconds up there to the time of Max Schachmann. But then we get the other camera view showing from the left side, our right side on the camera. We see that Joao Almeida did a fantastic job sprinting all the way to the line, and he throws his bike, but loses half a second to Max Schachmann. So Schachmann's got to be getting super motivated right now, knowing that with the average speed of 53 kilometers just there over, and Almeida not being able to deceive him right now, well, we know that Schachmann knows that he's only got to worry about the course, the U.S. Pro Champion that's out on the course. Now, there's going to be a few other guys getting ready to leave too once we get into the late stages here of stage 1, and we're going to see, of course, Skjelmose up on the ramp. Once we look at Skjelmose's chain ring, he's running a 68.10. If this is true, I'm not going to individually count each tooth on his chain ring and his cassette, but a 68.10? Matthias Skjelmose? Really? A 68.10? That's a massive gear for a course that's pretty flat. Okay, running one by, this is the time that I agree that if you're going to run one by a course like today's, probably perfect for a one by, but a 68.10, that's a massive gear. Well, Skjelmose leaves the ramp, and if I back the film up before he left the ramp and we go all the way into Paris-Nice, it was Skjelmose that had that nasty crash on the mountain stage where he hit the center island, and he said he thought he'd broken something in his hip at that crash. Well, luckily for us, Skjelmose is still on some form as he leaves the ramp. Does have his knee taped up that we'll see later at the finish as he's flying into the left corner. Once he comes out of the left corner, he starts sprinting full gas, and he'll cross the line 12 seconds back from Max Schachmann in 12th place. Now, we know right now that Skjelmose is coming on some decent form with this only 12-second gap to Schachmann, and we know Skjelmose, when we listen to his interview, that he's super motivated for the classics coming up. So luckily that crash at Paris-Nice does not seem to be hampering Skjelmose too much, but we see the tape on his knee when I back the film up as he's sprinting into the finish, and that's a sign for professional cyclists of always a little bit of concern because knee issues are not always easily solvable. So pay attention to that as we get into the later stages for Matthias Skjelmose. Now, the last rider to leave the ramp is Brandon McNulty. He's wearing the U.S. Pro Championships jersey. He's running a one by of 62.11 on his bike, and when he leaves the ramp, this is the last person that Max Schachmann has to worry about. As we see Michael Leonard from Ineos, he comes up and crosses the line, and he's in 10th place, 15 seconds back from Max Schachmann. So, with Brandon McNulty, the last rider out on the course, once he starts flying into the very final corners here, Max Schachmann's getting a little bit excited because they know that of course, Brandon McNulty's already behind the 8 ball at this point in time as the American riders sprint to the finish, but he's going to lose 34 seconds on today's race. So Max Schachmann's going to start celebrating in the hot seat because he knows he has another stage victory here at the Basque Country. Actually his 4th stage victory, and along with that, it's going to put him in the hot seat as he's wearing the race leader's jersey to start tomorrow's stage. Now, he'll have all the jerseys because, of course, he won stage 1, except for the youth jersey that'll go over to Michael Leonard from Team Ineos. Young kid, Canadian kid, did a fantastic job to finish 10th on today's stage 1. Now, how does this start affecting everything when we look into the further stages? Well, like I said at the beginning of this video, winning the individual time trial most likely means your team has to be on the front for stage 2. And when we start looking at all of the profiles going into tomorrow's stage 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 6 stages here at the Basque Country, the biggest thing to highlight about tomorrow's stage is it looks like it could be one for a pretty good sized group sprint coming into the finish. So of course, Soudal Quickstep just have to control everything and then hope that Max Schachmann doesn't lose the jersey on time bonuses. When we start pointing out other things to pay attention here at the Basque Country, there's no summit finishes. All of the stages here, of course, have some kind of climbs. This is the Basque Country, and all of the climbs are shorter but steeper here at the Basque Country. So this should be a really exciting race to be explosive. And of course, without any of the first page star riders at the European peloton deciding not to show up here at the Basque Country, that means everybody's a little bit more level playing field. Joao Almeida has shown some form for UAE team members. Max Schachmann might be showing some of that form that we've seen a couple years back, if not a few years back, when he was winning Paris-Nice back-to-back. We haven't seen great form out of Max Schachmann throughout the more recent years, but clearly here at over 53 kilometers an hour, Max Schachmann's got some form. So, congratulations, Max Schachmann, Soudal Quickstep. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys for stage 2 of the Basque Country real soon.
Gracias.